I was not personally aware of the problem of lead poisoning, and it came to me with dramatic suddenness when a child died in Woodlawn of lead poisoning.
I remember one afternoon, I was there as the organizer for one of the tenants unions meetings, and the secretary, who was very dutiful, very faithful, and dependable, did not show up at the meeting. But she apologized. She said she had to take her children to the emergency, 2 children. And one was a very small baby, and the other was maybe 3 years old, 4 years old. So she said they had swollen stomachs, and the doctor said that they had lead poisoning.
We were seeing kids with significant levels and resultant harm. Lead poisoning is serious, all the way up to lethal, but before lethal, there's huge impairments on the brain with all that implies.
I was very curious about this. I said, lead poisoning? How'd they get lead poisoning? She said, well, those peeling chips off the side of the wall of the house.
These dwelling places were traps. Children played and would pick up chips of lead paint and swallow them.
The children who were smaller would be in reach of the windowsill, that little running board in front of the window, those who had those older apartments, and the children would suck on these windowsills. I said, what? And immediately I became so disturbed by the fact that the disrepair of the house and these apartments led to the poisoning of the children.
It does affect kids in very fundamental ways: growth and development, and mental activity, performance in school. All those things are at stake. The issue was that we didn't have any prescribed screening of potential victims, and the victims were easy to identify. They were very young kids, typically in old ramshackle housing, which means slums where poor people are.
When we decided to report this to the health department, we were summarily dismissed.
I do recall the activity of the public health system, the Board of Health in Chicago, and the county system. And what I recall is that they were doing nothing.
We didn't have any property owner support at all.
No, there was not that kind of cooperation. It was not, and it was not taken seriously.
They were eager not to be disturbed in their collection of rents.
It had to be a public issue first in terms of getting the newspapers and the media. They were slow to really dramatize this. Small articles in the newspaper and that kind of thing.
These were damaged kids, and so we thought the important thing was to get a baseline. How common is this, if only in a hospital population, both the clinic and the inpatient? And we discovered it was quite high.
I made contact with Quentin Young, and it was decided that a committee on lead poisoning should be formed.
We were able to screen and demonstrate that this was much more commonplace, much more widespread.
Eventually, people began to take on this issue, not only as organizers, but leaders in the community. And they began to get this problem to the attention of the legislators.
I introduced a resolution into the city council, partly to enact legislation and partly to draw attention immediately to the situation.
You don't get change unless you're able to win the sympathy and support of the majority.
After a long time, the Committee on Health reported an ordinance, and it was not a direct prohibition, it was an indirect attack on the problem. The ordinance that the administration entered was much easier on landlords.
So the strategy for the movement was to put everyone on alert, starting with the smaller children. And I remember one of the volunteers from the community was a young lady named Lucky Wilder. And Lucky was very creative, and she developed a comic book. And the character in the comic book was Lethal Letty. And that character was used throughout the comic book to show how dangerous it was for children.
The becoming aware of lead poisoning, where it came from and what to do about it, was a national event, and didn't happen overnight. It was about a decade, as I recall, before there were standards that obtained throughout the country.
And I'm sure it's not solved. I'm sure that that owners of property are eager to rent it without doing the kind of careful scouring of an apartment that's necessary and expensive.
Tell you why we're still battling this problem of lead poisoning. It's because of the people who are affected by it are not people who are in power.
One problem is that the body of people who are victimized are African Americans. When I think how much time has gone by and how much we know about it, how dangerous it is, and how it should have been eliminated completely long ago,